lots of restaurants that actually have fresh seafood coming off the lake and off the ocean and in the forests,
Oh, good.
um, you know, and off the farms
Okay.
right there. Like the place where we ate gets all of its produce and everything from a farm, which is right down the street.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So
Wonderful.
it was a nice day, a really nice day.
Okay. Very good. I'm glad you enjoyed yourself.
Long ride.
My goodness.
So we're not going to have Leonie tonight.
Um,
Saw a message from her earlier,
Hmm.
but I don't know about anybody else. So
so,
the streaming has started.
oh, okay. So I know Vaughn won't be able to make it. She sends her regrets. She's had an emergency that she has to address, but
Oh,
she plan on being here next week.
Hmm.
okay. Okay. So I guess it's who else? Gio and Kim
Yeah.
will maybe come.
Hmm.
Yeah. So we can give it a few minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
What else is happening in the world?
Well, it got leaked that Breyer is planning on retiring. Nobody knows. The whole world has gone crazy about that. The whole country. Um, but nobody knows when he's going to do that.
Mm,
And they're all talking about possible replacements: African American woman, Cheryl Eiffel, Michelle Childs, um, Leonora Kruger, uh,
Mhm.
and
You said who is
concerning
going to retire?
Breyer, the Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Uh-huh.
there's a lot of discussion about um, Joe Biden having said during the campaign that one of his goals was to name the first African American woman to the
Mm-hmm.
Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I wish his goal was to be to impeach two or three of the sitting justices already. That's it. That's what instead of making that statement, that's how he gets boxed in.
Mm-hmm.
Or to say that he would nominate Merrick Garland and then take one of the people that is the potential for the Supreme Court and make them AG. Cheryl Eiffel, I've got my sign ready. Cheryl Eiffel for AG.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
oh,
Because
okay.
Merrick Garland is a judge. He's not a prosecutor.
Okay. Right. Right. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been
That's
thinking
good.
about that a lot since this news broke this morning.
That's good. That's good. I like that idea.
Yeah, and at the same time that he expands this court, there are 9 judicial districts in the United States, and there should be one Supreme Court justice from each of them.
Oh, that's a good point.
So I'm hoping that he'll take this opportunity before he makes this nomination and he will expand the court. He doesn't need anybody's permission to expand this court
Right. Right. Mm-hmm.
because unless he can do something in the Senate, which he's proven he can't,
Mm-hmm.
the only way to get anything done is to do it and then let it go to the court to
Mm-hmm.
be adjudicated.
Okay. And then the other thing too is, I don't know if he has the power to do this, but there needs to be term limits with those justices.
Yes, That
That's
would be the
right.
Congress. The Congress would have to do that.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. He couldn't do that.
Uh-huh.
So, and the other is restricted, so have so many very strict terms and conditions that nobody would want to be it unless they want to be it for a real reason,
Hmm.
that they would fight for it.
Right.
Um, because I'm really disturbed. I just can't. I'm not understanding. And I went to bed ruminating about this. I'm not understanding why there aren't groups like the NAACP, the ACLU, the whoever, and the whoever, national organizations that aren't bringing civil actions on behalf of the American people against some of these people.
Right.
Like Mitch McConnell, like Ted Cruz, like um, Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene or Green Taylor, whatever her name is, Lauren Bohart, that there aren't actions being taken that people can get behind and support.
Hmm.
Just like Mark Elias is, I mean, his whole law practice now is suing states over anti voter rights bills.
Hmm.
Well, there should be some lawyer who is willing to, for instance, bring an action against Clarence Thomas because he voted on issues related to activities for which his wife was involved and raised money for.
Okay.
He should have recused himself, and in not recusing himself, he has breached an ethical principle for which he should be impeached.
That's, yeah.
Because you can impeach a Supreme Court justice. You can
Oh.
you can impeach um, a senator. You can impeach a member of Congress.
Hmm.
So I'm not sure um, why that isn't happening. Um,
I just think since we've had, all these years of dealing with Donald, that the ethical standards are in the toilet. And people are just overwhelmed with all the stuff they have to do, you know.
yeah. But it didn't. I go back to our discussion, Michelle, with Jared. This is not just about um,
Donald.
Donald Trump. If you go
Mm-hmm.
back and you even look at the election in the first term of George W. Bush and how that election was stolen through political hacks in the state of Florida.
Hmm.
And I, for the life of me, have yet to figure out why. I've forgotten his name. The vice president that ran against George W. Bush, the Democratic nominee, the tall guy who
Right.
said he
Yeah.
invented the internet, which
Right.
he didn't invent the internet, but he certainly was instrumental in opening it up to the public, which is what he meant. But anyway, I can't figure out why he and his campaign and his funders decided to just give it up, as opposed to fighting George Bush and taking it to the Supreme Court about the count in Florida.
Hmm.
I've never figured that out. I just, it makes no sense. So, anyway, that's what is going on, Michelle, today. I mean, people on Squawk Box, they haven't stopped talking about it. Everybody's talking about Brian. They don't even know when he's retiring. He may retire next Christmas or something. you know.
I didn't even know. I started watching Ozark today. I was on Netflix catching up on Ozark, the newest season.
Well, yeah, and the new season is pretty good, but keep in mind, it's only part one. There are two parts to it. That's why it's so short.
Oh, okay, okay.
So, I, I don't know. Every day it seems I get heavier and heavier about what's going on in this country.
Yeah.
Because I don't believe Joe Biden is going to expand the court. I don't believe he's going to remove Merrick Garland out of the way, get him out of the way.
Right.
I mean, he even has, as a president, he has the power to appoint a special counsel consultant. And I mean, you can appoint anything you want to appoint in the Department of Justice. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure about what's going on with this Merrick Garland thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And maybe Merrick Garland was his person, and that's why Obama plucked him out of nowhere for the Supreme Court. And now they have Merrick Garland as a chain around their necks or something. I don't know. I don't know. I even had a dream the other night that Obama ran for Senate in Illinois again. And when I woke up from it, I was saying to myself, what is going on here? So
Well, let's go on and get started because I don't know what to say about Gio. Gio's often kind of late, but Kim, not so much. So let's just get started and go as far as the three of us can go. Let me welcome everyone to the Global Black Feminist Reading Circle. My name's Michelle Odom. I'm located in Brooklyn, New York. And we are currently having discussions on the love songs of W.E.B. Du Bois by Honorée, Fanonne, Jeffers. This is week 2 of our discussions, and we'll be here talking about this book through most of August. You can learn more about the Global Black Feminist Reading Circle. We have a website called readingchangeslives.wordpress.com. And we have a Facebook page, Global Black Feminist, and a YouTube channel that has the archives for all of the 17 books that we have discussed since 2014. So let's go around, everybody do their introduction. BJ?
I'm BJP Graham, and here's my book, The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, which I'm enjoying reading thus far and have recommended it highly to friends and family.
Yeah.
I'm Karen Johnson, and here's my copy of my book, and it's a pleasure reading this. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So who wants to get us started? We don't have a facilitator or an agenda. Tonight's chapters were the definitions of Siddity and song, what was it, song 1 or song 2? Song 2. Yeah. And the definitions of Siddity.
I guess I'll get started. I like the format in which he's writing the story. when we go to the songs, you notice that it's in third person because it has to reflect back on previous generations. But when we get to the different topics, such as the definition of Siddity and the other topic, the definition of Siddity, I noticed that this story is told in first person, and that person is Ailey. I really liked Ailey's descriptive relationships with her family, with the different members of her family, with Nana. I didn't get a clear understanding as to why Nana chose her as a favorite, but I'll come back to that. But I really enjoy Ailey and her relationship with Nana. And you see that intergenerational relationship, even though Nana seems to be bourgeois and kind of classist, she's still passing on knowledge of her own lived experience, right? And I really like that because it makes me reflect on the relationship that I had with my maternal grandmother as well. And I learned so much from my maternal grandmother, sitting in her kitchen when she was cooking Sunday meals, and she had stories with each meal in terms of how she cooked it, or even names of certain meals that she had that I never heard of, like Welsh rabbit. And I didn't realize that Welsh rabbit, I thought it was an actual rabbit, but it wasn't a rabbit. At least she didn't cook a rabbit. But anyway, I just remember my bond with my grandmother was in her kitchen with her cooking. And so with Ailey, I really liked the bond with her grandmother. And the other thing about Ailey, what I'm noticing, so it seems like this story seems like a coming of age kind of story as she's telling it, because we're looking at each age group and in her lived experiences, be it with the family, be it with going through school, and her relationships with her parents and her siblings. And so I really am enjoying this. I just wanted to bring that out with just starting with the definitions of Siddity, and I guess I'll share later when we get to the songs.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I didn't really have much of a relationship with my grandparents. Both of my grandfathers were deceased before I was born. My father's father died earlier in the same year that I was born. So you know how Black folks always say somebody dies in the family when so I took my grandfather's place. And my grandmother's, my father was a AME preacher, which means I grew up moving all over the country. And so we were never really close geographically to my grandmothers. One of them passed when I was about 8 years old, and the other one when I was maybe about 12 or so. So I do feel that as an absence in my life and an experience that I, missed out on, and a source of wisdom that I missed out on. But yeah, and so the part of the story that felt most familiar to me was the high school scenes and the mean girls and the being accused of being Siddity and that whole thing. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that she chose this word Siddity. During this era of this story, Siddity was a word. And girls in, especially all Black high schools, used it as a weapon and also as a protective shield. I was considered Siddity. So I relate. And I really wasn't Siddity except for I had to be something because I didn't like I didn't I didn't know the music. You know, I didn't know the lyrics to the song, and I couldn't sing, and I wasn't very good at, and I think some of that came because I just was serious. I still am serious, you know. So I think I was labeled as Siddity because most of the girls of in my class were older because I had skipped grades. And I just simply never could catch up. I couldn't do the things like if I went to a football game, I had to go with my parents and they could go alone. I mean, my parents would sit where the parents sit and I would go with the kids and I would have a good time. But when I talk about the protective part, especially I'm thinking about Antoinette, the character who gets picked on by the kids of mean. I can't relate to that because there were a lot of kids who were kids of mean in my black high school, in my black school, elementary school. I went to segregated schools from elementary school, junior high, and until I was in the ninth grade. So, um, there were lots of Antoinettes. And the Antoinettes, as my mother would say, you keep collecting all these kids. I don't know their parents, you know. So I was a collector of the Antoinettes. Um, and then I was also sometimes victimized by those who were who couldn't figure out why I liked the Antoinettes. I mean, and I guess during that time it might have been very confusing for me, but I didn't act like it was confusing. Um, Gwen, I think I said in this told you about a girl who was in my class in the fourth grade who sometime during the late part of the fourth grade year she didn't come back to school, and she was my friend. I was really in love with her, I think. um, and she was a Antoinette, but she was smart and the teacher didn't like her because she was an Antoinette. She didn't have family like I had family. I mean, my mother was the principal at a goddamn school, you know. So, and I had five or six aunts who were teachers in the school. So, anyway, she disappeared, and for the remainder of the school year, I really was in grief, in serious grief of having lost her. And even up until last year, I'm still asking people around here, do they know her? Or did did she go to the black high school? Because I didn't go to the black high school. I left the black high school in ninth grade. I went to the white high school. So um, I really did relate and really thank Honorée for including um, the Antoinettes in the story. I hope she brings her back. I was hoping that Ailey would freelance with Antoinette. That I was hoping when I read when she went to the locker and she was there I was trying to coach Ailey in my brain into how to handle this.
Mm-hmm.
So I really did appreciate, and I think Honorée is doing a lot of that. She's giving us an opportunity to see the multi-dimensional nature of Black people. And I was very disappointed in Ailey.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
but I was very proud of her father. I have fallen in love with her father. I fall in love very, very quickly with characters because he asked the right question. And the right question was, were you part of a group picking on this kid?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I think he was never satisfied with her answer.
Mm-hmm.
But he, as opposed to her mother, who would have said, "Girl, you done bunched your drawers at this point. Don't you ever." And she would have taught the lesson, and the father didn't teach the lesson. But at
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, he was honorable in his examination of her. Um,
And he also let her know that he had high expectations of her.
yeah, yeah.
You know.
And I had a Siddity grandmother who really wasn't my father's biological mother, but because he went to boarding school so young, because there was no high school for him to go to no school for him to go to after 8th grade in Jim Crow, his mother sent him to boarding school, which is why I know all the Black people in America, all the Black families, because that's what happened.
Oh, what boarding school was this?
So, um,
What'd you
I
say,
had
Karen?
Oh, which boarding school was this?
he went to Florida A&M. It was FAMC at the time. FAMU had a high school,
Okay.
and that's where he met my mother in high school, and all of her 11 brothers and sisters, because they all went to FAMC high school.
Mhm.
So, so I had that grandmother, and we called her Mama Nita. Hey, Gio, there you are. And then I had his biological mother, who was Grandma Nora. Um, Grandma Nora was a immigrant from Cuba, and she had lost two husbands by the time I was born. And she was very quiet, very inward. Um, my father was her oldest child. She brought him from up north in Cuba to the United States with his father, who worked on railroads in Cuba, and came to the and was hired by a company in the United States to build the Florida East Coast Railroad. He was a laborer. So, a special kind of laborer. I know that he has special skill of some kind, which is how he got to come here. So, Grandma Nora was very inward, very quiet, and I was always trying to figure people out. And I had to figure out she adored my father because her second husband, who she had 4 children for, was killed in an accident. And at the time, my father was a college student. So he became her other children's father. So her relationship was kind of multidimensional with my father. And her relationship with her grandchildren um, depended upon the day or the visit. So, but Grandma Nita was the one who I enjoyed being with all the time. She taught at FAMU and later at Columbia. And she had this huge house in Tallahassee. And my father and his roommate, by the time, I don't remember the old house, but she was the one that told you how to talk and how to greet people and remembering this and knowing that and reading this and smelling like this. I mean, she was I can't think of the name of perfume, but when you walked in her house smelled like it had been washed down in the stuff, and it was it's a beautiful, very soft odor, and it was very popular among women. And she died at age 92, at age 102. And when she retired from Columbia, she moved to a summer home that she had always had on Martha's Vineyard. So this Nana and Grandma, but Grandma Nita would have never tolerated her. She wouldn't have been friends with her. No, that wouldn't happen. And one summer I took classes at Florida State University when I was in high school, one summer, 2 summers. And so she was over at FAMU. And she gave me the lesson about, now I already went to a high school with nothing but other white kids, but she gave me the lesson of how to talk when I wanted to say something in class. She was very into comportment. So, looking at Ailey's relationship with her Nana, I understood. I looked at Lydia's relationship and Coco. I was very interested in Coco. Something happened to her. We don't know what happened to Coco. But something, I'm sure we'll find out. I think Coco has created this distance from her family because of something. But Lydia's relationship with Nana reminds me of my relationships with many of my 9 aunts. This whole family reminds me of my family, with all this secrets and who you don't tell Grandma Nora, don't tell Aunt Hizetta, don't tell. I mean, it just goes on and makes you crazy as a kid. It makes you crazy as a kid. And I can understand where Lydia wanted to just get the fuck out. Just be free from all this nonsense that's going on.
Let's bring Gio into the discussion. Welcome, Gio.
Hey, ladies. How are you doing this evening?
We good. How are you?
I'm fine now that I finished my computer update. Nothing worse than turn it on and like, no, you need these.
Yes.
And you wonder, will everything work when it restarts? No.
Yes.
Right.
I know. Give us your introduction.
Well, I'm Georgette Moses, and I'm joining you lovely people from Columbia, South Carolina. Yay!
So we just got started a few minutes ago, and we're right now talking about the definitions of Siddity. And so Karen and Jay have talked about.
I forgot to say, Michelle, I do want to add, as the southern one up in here, Siddity was fighting words. Wasn't it, Georgette?
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only fight I ever had in my life.
No, BJ.
Oh, you did have a fight.
Yeah.
Over that?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you win? Did you win the fight? That's what I wanted.
That's still up for question.
Okay.
No,
Well, a draw
I
is
just want to
okay.
defend myself because I was light skinned. You could see my bruises. The other girl, you couldn't see her bruises.
Okay.
So you really related to this story.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gio, anything?
Oh my goodness. Well, yeah. It this story was the definite definition of sedity. Because what who hasn't had that high school, grade school, middle school experience where you want to be in with the in crowd? You're smart, or you at least you know the answer today, right? And you raise your hand. All she had to do was not look at Antoinette, right? But she did it. And there ensued the problem. And I'm quite kind of not so sure that maybe her friend Cecily didn't like egg something on, right? Because why would she, just out of nowhere, just pick on poor Lydia? Hey, Kim.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm late.
No
Hey,
problem. I was
Kim.
late already, so you're good. You But that was very interesting, and the characters are so full, right? They're not three-dimensional, they're four-dimensional because they remind you of somebody you've known, or heard of. Oh my goodness. And I can just, imagine, can visualize Nana, propped up in her silk pajamas, smoking a cigarette in a jade holder. Oh my goodness. That is classic Renaissance, right? Harlem Renaissance time.
That was my mother.
Okay. Like, oh my. And then she tells how she was going downtown passing. Oh, girl, you living dangerously, aren't you? Yeah, it was an enjoyable part of the story. Yes.
The perfume was white shoulders.
Oh yeah. Oh, my mother loved white shoulders. Yes.
Hey, Kim.
Kim, you muted.
I was unmuting. How y'all doing?
We good. Give us your introduction.
I'm Kim Brandon. I'm in New York, and I'm glad to be here with my sisters.
Yes.
All right. We missed you last week, but Leonie was here.
Oh man, I invited Leonie, and then I couldn't make it.
Leonie was here, as well as a new person. I don't know if you know her, Von Terrence Bell, one of Karen's friends.
No.
So, yeah. So maybe next week we'll have everybody. So we are just right now, Kim, talking about the definitions of sedity.
The definitions of
Sedity.
okay.
You didn't read that chapter?
No, I have some medical stuff going on, so I'm just like, I'm
Okay.
here.
Okay. Well, sedity when back in high school when they used to say, "Oh, she acted sedity," she thinks she too good. She thinks she better than everybody.
Oh, I heard you say Diddy. I heard you say Diddy. I didn't hear the stuff part. So I was like, what's Diddy? I know it's the Diddy.
So the main character, Ailey, had that kind of experience where she was accused of being sedity and beat up by the girl. Well, I shouldn't be telling you because you got to read it.
I am so looking forward to a couple of hours to read this. I can't tell you.
Yeah.
You'll enjoy it. Definitely.
You'll enjoy it for real, because she's a poet. Honorée is a poet, so you will see that. Yeah.
Read a few passages.
Yeah.
I know I want to read from 48, and I also want to read from 49, but it's just a few passages.
Okay.
We talk about. So let's start with 48. Near the top.
Okay.
Yes, and this I think speaks to the issues of Siddity. Getting that grandmama, the bougie grandmama, training you. So it says, "Yes, ma'am."
Karen, could you move closer to your mic?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Wonderful.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Okay, so we're on 48, and it starts with yes, ma'am. Ailey, how many times have I told you that ma'am is servant talk? And we are not servants. At least we are not on my side of the family. I'm sorry. I wish your mother wouldn't take you down to the backwoods metropolis every summer. It's ruining you. Here's the cottage on Oak Bluffs. It's getting difficult to travel now. But do you know why I still go, Ailey? No, no, Nana. I go because there are Negroes like me, people with whom I feel comfortable. We are accomplished. We are quiet. We never make trouble. If you adhere to those rules, you will have peace with others. And so, I was reading this. I said, wow, her grandmama was really, really an interesting character. She was very classist. And then the other part on 49 that I want to read, you also see that she was classist, she was bourgeois, she was color conscious, and it is her upbringing in the particular African American community that instilled those kind of values in her that also can be very problematic for other African Americans, right, who don't have that kind of upbringing. And so, so let me jump to the other one, and then I'll engage on page 79, where she talks about watching stormy weather with looking at Lena Horne singing.
49.
In the second paragraph. Isn't Lena Horne beautiful? There was a girl I went to school with who was even prettier than that, but it wasn't Toomer when I went. It was the City Preparatory School for Negroes. Goodness, I can't even remember that girl's name. What was her name? My grandmother took a puff of her cigarette and blew it out. But I remember her face like it was yesterday. I was so jealous of that girl. You, Nana? Every woman has her insecurities, Ailey, especially if she doesn't know a man's heart. She pulled on her cigarette. God, I despise Bill Robertson. For the life of me, I don't know why they cast him in this movie. He looks like an ugly monkey. Puff, puff. Ailey, you want to hear a secret? But the thing that I'm really looking at is Nana and the kind of bougie classes values and colorist values that she's instilling in Ailey. And in the story, I don't even remember how Nana reacted to Ailey's mom, who was brown skin, right? Or I keep getting confused. Was Ailey's mom brown skin or was she light skin?
She was brown. She was like Lydia.
So I could imagine she probably was really not comfortable with her son, right? Ailey's dad marrying someone who had that kind of class background and color, because in this we definitely see this, and we have these kind of members in our families, right?
Yeah.
I had members like the older members in my family, particularly my mom's side, my dad's side of the family, who were very color conscious. My grandfather, my maternal grandfather, and all his siblings were very color conscious, and they were very bourgeois. And so I would notice how certain cousins would have favor because of skin color, being light skinned, and those of us who were brown skinned did not have favor. And so I appreciate how this story reflects a lot of the realities of some of our families, but also the problematic issues of colorism and classism and things like that in the Black family.
I had a light skinned aunt who said to me, "Every time you get a boyfriend, they're black as soot. What are you doing? Collecting the blackest boys you can find?"
Lord.
I mean, she actually said that to me. And it is problematic. And I think I've shared this before, that living in Jim Crow in the South, sometimes I couldn't tell if my teachers or people really liked me for who I was, as opposed to because I had green eyes and light skin and long hair, long silky hair. So there are two sides of this colorism issue in the Black community. I mean, if you go through any old copies of Ebony, it wasn't until probably the 1980s that you saw dark-skinned Black women on the cover. And Jet magazine used to do this insert to have a Black woman in a bathing suit. Y'all remember that?
The beauties of the week.
Is that what it was called?
Yeah.
The beauties of the week. And the beauties of the week were always light skinned. If you look at the Miss Homecomings and the Miss Howards and the Miss FAMUs and all those people, up until the 1970s, until James Brown or somebody declared Black is beautiful, you will see that they were all the light-skinned girls on campus. Those were the popular girls. And I always had an eye to that stuff, and I wasn't going to be one of them. I don't want to run for no Miss Homecoming. No, I don't want to run for no whatever you want. I'll be the president of student council, but I don't want to be no beauty queen or whatever it is. And it was really problematic in the sense that how the Antoinettes of the world suffered from the nanas. And I don't know, my grandma Nora, who immigrated from Cuba, was clearly Afro-Cuban. And and she was dark. But her husband, my father's father, was light, and clearly his wasn't pure Afro-Cuban. So it wasn't European Cuban. And and my grandmother never wanted to talk about it, but she tended to favor the two aunts that had long, silky hair, and not the children who were from her African American husband. It's very complex how people respond to this, and even now my granddaughter Imani, from time to time, she will say, "Oh, Miss So and So wanted Miles to come over, wants to be Miles's play aunt. How come she doesn't want to be my play aunt?" Because Miles was light skinned with green eyes. You know, my grandson, my oldest grandson. My youngest grandson is light skinned and he got the blonde hair. So, so, and the green eyes. But Imani is dark, and she doesn't, and she has beautiful kinky hair. And she could see it. I mean, one day she came home from the Afrocentric nursery school that we were paying all that money for, and she said she wanted some weeds. And we're trying to figure out what the hell is she talking about, weeds. And and after a while, one of Tara's friends said, "She's saying weave."
Poor baby.
Because some kid at this school had long hair and it was weeds.
Mhm.
Okay.
It's definitely something that we pass, through
Yeah.
the generations. I mean, my parents were too, I don't know, tasteful or sensitive to say anything directly, but I could see, my father he was maybe a little bit darker than me, and my mother was maybe, I don't know, somewhere between Geo and BJ. And her mother was lighter than all of y'all. And my uncle was black as coal, but he married a black woman who looked almost white. And so even though they wouldn't say anything, against darker people, being the child that I was, I couldn't help noticing the behavior and, and coming to some conclusion about what it meant.
Yeah. I guess I would categorize myself as Coco, because what Karen just pointed out in this dialogue with Nana, I had 8 aunts, and every one of them would have said some of this stuff. About who you ought to, that's why, I used to get in trouble all the time with the Antoinettes, and your parents are always trying to put you with, I couldn't, you have to be very careful about this. I think my parents wanted me to be friends with their children, with their friends' friends. And their friends were professionals and bourgeoisie. And they didn't know any people who weren't. They weren't friends with people who weren't. They were friendly with people who weren't. They had relationships with people at the church and blah, blah, blah. But I didn't want to be with their friends' friends, with their Siddity stuck up self. While everybody at school is telling me I'm Siddity, but it had to do with, it didn't have to do with my behavior. It had to do with the projection of the family I came from's behavior.
Right.
What's that expression? you know, when you use the master's tools, you build the master's house. So that when you look at the field slaves and the house slaves, and when you get to be the house slave, it's because you were some way, had some white blood in you. You know, there was some Black woman that was raped and created you. And the closer you get to being the master of your own house and the lady of the house, a lot of that kind of gets confusing, that we didn't have a model of our African traditions to lean into. So the only thing that we could see as polished and beautiful is their traditions, the traditions that they're making from stolen people and stolen land. And then we spoon feed that to our children. So when freedom came, it also came with this. It also came with this,
Right.
we gotta be as close to white as possible. And it's just, it's like I want to love that part of me that says, even just now when you were saying that your mother or aunt was somewhere between Geo and DJ, it just gave me that feeling of, wait a minute, we can't talk about each other's skin colors because that's that thing. And so viscerally, that made me uncomfortable just now. And this innocent little remark just made me feel like, oh, that's why I always try to pick people who we know from celebrities, because I said something about somebody who felt that she was light skinned, and in my mind, she was dark skinned. And all of this is relative, right?
Right.
Because a lot, when I'm around certain people, I'm dark skinned, and then when I'm around other people, I'm light skinned. So all of it is relative. I'm never going to pass the paper bag test. I might be like on the border, but it's just something that I love, that we can talk about it, but I still feel like it's a part of my blueprint, and I don't like it there.
But I mean, I think the reality is that we do come in different shades, and we came in different shades before we got to this country.
That's
you
right,
know, it's just built into nature. We have red flowers and yellow flowers and green flowers and blue flowers. And you know, we can pretend like we don't see there are different colors of flowers, but there's still different colors of flowers. The problematic piece for me is when we start to say a yellow flower is better than a red flower. Orange flower is the best flower, you know, and then we start to build these hierarchies, and, you know, that's where all of the stuff. But for me, it's a mistake to try to deny the reality that we come in different shades. And for some of us, all of the shades are beautiful, you know, but for some of us, they're not. You know, and so for those who are not,
all I'm saying is, but let me just make this one point. All I'm saying is that it's in our Constitution. It was in our Constitution that depending on how much white blood I could prove I had, it made me more of a citizen and it made me more human. So yes, the flowers were beautiful when we were back on the continent. But then when you get here, and this country says only the blue flowers are beautiful, and if you don't get pollinated by a blue bee with blue pollen, you're a weed. You're a weed. So now all of a sudden we're telling our children, go hang out with the blue flowers so you get the bees. Get to the bees now. And so it's I'm not saying that it's, I don't see color. I'm saying that this is the tradition of this society, this culture that we're in. And I don't like it that it is internalized even in myself and even in the way I brought up my daughter, because she had hundreds of Barbies and she liked playing with the white Barbies. So I hit all of those little bitches. I just said, you know what? It's working for me in my house. But at the same time, I still have my stuff. And the last thing I just wanted to say was that even with the different colors and everything, there's this level of colorism that this group has on the people who are darker. And then the people who are dark in the nose, there is another stigma. And so this is just, it feels like COVID. It just feels like we all got to have these masks or something to try to figure out how to save ourselves from colorism, because it is a monster. It's a beast.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
I also want to say that the complexity of how this particular issue is raised in the context of the book is also a mixture of class. And Nana is not only color struck, as they used to say in the South, she is also Siddity in the way of a certain superiority of both economic and social class. So poor little Ailey is being dipped in this mixture. And I love the way Coco ain't having it. Lydia put up with it till she didn't put up with it. And then the mama and the daddy put up. I mean, I really like this father. It is a difficult thing to put your mother in her place. And he put his mother in his place, in her place, in his love for his family and his love for his wife. Because what he did was give her permission to stand. And I just love that. So y'all send him my way.
Okay, well, Karen, Gio, anything else you want to say about this chapter before we move on to the song 2? Now, I know, Karen, last week you were talking about Dante. You were telling us something about Dante, but we didn't know what you were talking about because we hadn't read that part yet. You're muted, Karen. Do you remember what you were saying about Dante?
Oh, right. So last week what I was thinking was that I was thinking about how Lydia, of course, was very rebellious, but in retrospect, perhaps she was rebellious because of the conflict in terms of how she's raised in her family. But I also was thinking that Lydia was rebellious because she might have been subjected to molestation from her uncle, because Ailey was subjected to molestation. And that sometimes, and so by her being rebellious and running off, I've actually am ahead of the book, so I have some more insight in terms of what happened, but I won't spoil it.
Well, don't tell us.
I missed an important part, and I had to go back and read, because when Ailey tells Coco about Gandhi, I had missed the part of understanding that Gandhi was Nana's husband, was the grandfather. I had missed that part.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking Gandhi was a family friend, because in the South, children in the South, in the Black South, children are not allowed to call adults by their first name. That is an absolute. But if there is a close family friend that has come along through the generations, you have no idea how many aunts and uncles I have by this, then you are told to call that person Aunt so-and-so or Uncle so-and-so. if there are first cousins, like if you have a first cousin and they're an adult, you have to call them aunt or uncle, not by their first name. Um, Something as a nana that I correct my grandchildren because my daughter has a circle of friends, and her father's family who grew up in they from New England, so they don't know about the Southern rule. And I have fought about this when she was a child and now with my grandchildren. I just, when I was on the holiday, had to sit down and explain to my youngest grandson, you cannot call Kelly Kelly. Kelly is an adult. I know we all call Kelly Kelly, and I know the other little kids call Kelly Kelly, but you are not allowed to call Kelly Kelly. You can call her Miss Kelly, or you can call her Aunt Kelly. You can even call her Kelly Lexi's mother, but you cannot call her Kelly. So, um, there are rules, and and a lot of it. So I didn't know Gandhi was. I thought Gandhi was a family friend, and they called him Gandhi. I missed that. I didn't know. And then when I went back, I realized it was the grandfather. Nana, Nana, you better shut up with all this shit under your skirt. That's how I felt about it.
Did you want to say anything else about this chapter?
No.
Okay, well, why don't you get us started on talking about song 2?
Oh my. Didn't we see this coming?
No, it's like a horror movie.
Oh my goodness. I'm like, oh, Micco, dude, your first mistake. Well, but he couldn't help himself, right? Because he'd been, as a young boy, his father's bad traits were impressed upon him. So the Western thought of, all of this is mine. Yeah, y'all go on. And you two tribes, y'all can all go together. I'm staying here and I'm gonna claim all this, not realizing you're just one man by yourself. How you gonna keep all this land if they want to come and take it? Which they found a way to through an unscrupulous person who played on his internal guilt about killing his father. Right? So I'm like, wow, dude, but you're already making a mistake because and though it may not be colorism, it probably was. The wife he chose, right? She could pass for white. And her mentality was that of the Westerner, of the invaders. So she really didn't fit in and could only lead to his downfall because of the things she wanted that she knew she couldn't have because of her standing. But yet you're going to still force your husband, no, you need to you need to be a farmer, buy some pigs. Next thing you know, you need to get some slaves. I need a slave. What you need a slave for? You live in a hut. What's the slave going to do? Y'all going to be sitting in there looking at each other. Oh yeah. It was interesting and sad. And then also I love the appearance of the reintroduction of the spirit of the forest, which is what I'm going to call the little person, right? Who had guided Coromantee Panther to the village, and then also was there to talk to Micco, but Micco, I don't think he could. He misinterpreted the presence of the spirit. So because of what he wanted to be, he failed to see the truth about this Englishman he invited into his home because, it reminded him of his father. And then his fear of not truly being who he appeared to be, right? he has African blood and he's the Indian that the Englishmen have decided they're going to kill on sight because they want what you got, brother. And so he makes a terrible deal with the devil. So I'll let somebody else pick it up from there.
That's exactly what I call it, a deal with the devil.
Things I had some questions, right? And I was saying to myself, why did Micco think that he could trust Samuel, right? And it does say that Micco was old enough to be Samuel's dad. But why did he share the fact that, he had African heritage, especially when he didn't even tell his own wife, the person who he has the most intimate relationship with, right? The mother of his kids.
Yeah.
And so that baffled me. And in the book, I was saying that the rationale that was given wasn't convincing enough. The rationale for the reader that he was desperate for a friend because he felt that he could trust Samuel as the friend. So that piece for me was very baffling. But I like the point that you made, Gio, about the spirit of the forest. Now that makes sense to me. I was thinking that the person who kept appearing to him might have been the spirit of his dad, but I like the fact that you connected it to the spirit of the forest because that ties to linking to their culture, having much more connection to the culture and to the land. And I think that now that you said the spirit to the forest, and how you mentioned the wife, I'm looking at the fact that she had taken on Western ways and was imposing those ways on him, on Micco, really clouded his judgment, and the fact that he, to the point where he was losing tradition, his own cultural tradition, indigenous traditions. And so that's how I look at it. Because even towards the end, didn't it seem like he might have been having a relationship with Samuel as well? But I like the point that you made. Thank you.
I absolutely enjoyed your description of all of that. And I think, yeah, he still tried to have a relationship with him, but by that time, Samuel had moved him and his wife and the daughter into a shack on the south side of the property, like in amongst the slave cabins. But I guess, what is it? Hope springs eternal. Poor Micco. He couldn't read the writing that was clearly on the wall. And I think it was his judgment was clouded. You made an important point because he no longer had that connection with tradition, right? That spiritual connection that tells you when something's not right. Because he had guilt for, right, having to make that choice between his uncle and his father's life,
Mm-hmm.
and not having really truly resolved that, right? Which I guess if he probably had have been more within the culture, right, he would have been able to resolve that on a spiritual and emotional level. And then that dysfunction helped him make bad decisions because he wanted to see his father, I think, in Samuel. But that dude, well, he was his father, wasn't he? But not the good part that Micco remembered of his father.
Right.
Mhm.
As you all have been talking, what occurs to me is that essentially Micco had had a good life. He had had strong spiritual foundation. He had had a supportive and wise father and grandfather. And he talks about his vulnerabilities, that he was lonely, that he felt guilt and needed to somehow find redemption around murdering his father. But there's something else that occurs to me about this, and and his situation. And that is, even though he had been told, he had been taught. Bushy hair had taught him. His mother had taught him about trust. But I think in his loneliness, those lessons kind of dissipated to an extent. But here's the question. Who would have thought? Who could have seen what was coming? And I think that our ancestors most of them having been good human beings, could never have imagined the horror that was coming. And, keep in mind that in Micco's tribe, there had always been white men. Even the cracker. Remember the cracker that killed the kid with the cow or the herd or whatever? But in all of your human imagination, even now we sit in 2022, could we have imagined that there would be such an erosion of humankind?
Yeah, that's what worries me about the coming tyranny.
I know. I knew you were going to say that, Michelle. Yeah.
Yeah, that I don't know, that we really, in fact, I know people who to this day tell me it's not going to get that bad, that we're not going to stand for it, that people are going to fight back, and I don't even know how to say to them, I don't know what history you've been reading. We've got this business going on with the Ukraine right now. I just recently watched, Janice, Andrea Chalupa is one of the co-hosts of Gaslit Nation.
Yeah.
And she created a film called Mr. Jones, which is currently on Hulu. Mm-hmm. So I just watched it. And it's about the period in Russian-Ukrainian history when the Russians starved millions of Ukrainians to death, just a straight up genocide. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. People like them.
Yeah, and even in contemporary history, the USSR moved into had a military operation, and I think this was like 6 years ago or 7 years ago. And I've seen Chalupa's film, Mr. Jones, a couple of times. And they moved in. It was a military operation, but the soldiers were dressed like the Ukrainian people dress. And there was a genocide, and this is like 6 years ago. Along the Ukrainian border, which is why, just to fill people in, why what Trump was doing and what Trump has done in meddling in the affairs of the Ukraine during his administration was so dangerous. And the idea that he would try to, on behalf of Vladimir Putin, compromise the president of the Ukraine, everyone was pointing back to the recent genocide. So, and people are, even people who are saying, we're moving into an authoritarian society, we're moving into fascism, it's almost like they can't allow their imagination to evolve. And I think that was happening to Micco.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but he had no history
Right.
to rely
Right.
upon.
Uh,
We got plenty of history to rely upon.
right. That's the big
So,
difference.
yeah,
Right.
I just, um, I kept saying, it kept ringing in my brain, but he can't imagine. That was beyond what happened from that point on was beyond his imagination.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that all these people running around saying, yeah, the Africans sold Africans into slavery.
Mm-hmm.
But Honorée tries to make the point that prisoners of war, people who had worked against the interests of tribes, those were the people who Africans said, take them wherever, we got some people like that. I'd say, yeah, take them wherever, But I in relationship in the Samuel Micco relationship, I think a lot of it was just loneliness. That he didn't have male companionship. And I'd like to hear Karen talk more about you thought that the Samuel and Micco's relationship was more intimate.
No, I asked the question, why did he think that he could confide in Samuel? Samuel he was old enough to be his father. Micco was old enough to be Samuel's father.
Mm-hmm.
So why did he think he could confide in someone who's, young enough to be his son? And in terms of the intimate relationship, it's like he shared something with Micco that he never shared with his wife, the one that he had the most intimate relationship with.
Oh, that's an
Yeah,
interesting way.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's
even though she
interesting.
might be, part European,
Mm-hmm.
she still also had indigenous roots. So why did you think that you could share with with this colonizer, this stranger, who just walked on
And
your?
I think Micco was kind of weak. I mean, there's some part about he's a farmer, he's not a fighter, you know, and he just really let Mahala push him around, which was not a good idea. Sometimes it's a good idea to listen to your wife, but in this case, it was not a good idea. And I just think that whatever their attitudes were about appropriate male roles and female roles, like the whole thing about offering your 10-year-old daughter in marriage says something to me about what you think about girls and women.
That's
Mm.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Um.
Kim, Gio?
Oh, it just all made me think about this phrase I heard in a movie I watched last night. The guy said, you can put whiskers on a snake, but it's still going to be a snake.
Mhm. Um.
Yes.
I
So,
like I agree with Michelle that he was weak, and his weaknesses showed even as he was a child when he wanted so much to have a relationship with his father despite what he understood about how his father behaved with his mother. So,
Mm-hmm.
but but it also um, gives us pause. I think. Thank God, Honorée, for giving us pause on this one. That as black people, we have begun to trust too many white people. We trust them with our secrets. We allow them to appropriate our culture without questioning and challenging. I have said this over and over, and I've said it on the air, so it's no secret. I do not believe in interracial marriage. Now, if you want to have relationships, I mean, all of my relationships with white people are well tested, and I take some and leave the rest. You don't pass the test, you don't go on a journey with me. And then there are still some things that I expect my white friends not to expect of me. And if you don't know what if you don't know where that boundary lies, then maybe you need to be paused. So I don't know, that's how I am. So when I saw this, I'm thinking to myself, what hole is he trying to fill? And I thought about his loneliness, and I thought about maybe he didn't grieve properly, and maybe they didn't give him enough responsibility when he was young. When he was younger, so he didn't fully mature. And I think that was what Joe was trying to tell him at the river, which is why Joe didn't answer his question. He was simply saying, you've got to go find for yourself, because there's some rivets that are not finely tuned in your life, so but I think, one of the things I'm loving about this book is she has so many nuggets and lessons that we need to think through. We really need to think through. So he dug his. I sympathize I sympathize with him about this relationship and how he missed the mark.
Yeah. But I tell you, once Sam Pinchard moved them out of their house and moved himself into their house, it still seemed like Micco hadn't fully caught on. It seems like it didn't really hit him until he was having the conversation with Pop George, and Pop George called Sam Pinchard Massa, and he's like, "Why you calling him that?" What he told me to call him. That's when it seemed to hit Micco that, so I think he was just slow on the uptake, generally speaking.
Well, I was thinking, now he knows he's in trouble after he had a conversation with Pop George, and he's going to have to kill Samuel in the same way that he had to kill his father.
Well, now that would make sense.
Well, I wasn't writing the book, so I went along with the story. Because
we still got a lot of pages to go.
in my book, Samuel would have been dead.
Long time ago.
He moved in my own house. I would have roasted that house in the middle of the night.
Yes. What I'm talking about.
You know, but I think people do. Honorée is giving us a lot of stuff to synthesize.
Yeah.
I do think that people can miscalculate. I mean, in my own professional life, I've had to pull some black people aside and say, you need to look at how you are developing your relationship with so and so. And I mean, even to the point where I've had to say to a couple of people, they will stab you not only in your back, but in your neck and turn you around and slit your throat. If you think you are going to have a fair competition in this agency with that person. So, anyhow.
Same way you get immigrants that, come to this country and, that white folks have helped facilitate bringing to this country. And they think they're coming to the land of opportunity, and white folks are nice and you better stay away from those blacks. And, I've even heard a number of, especially Indians from India, talking recently, and Asians too, about how really shocked they are by the open racism going on in this country today. Now, black folks may not want to believe things could get worse than they are, but we ain't really surprised to see racism rearing its ugly head. But I think for some of the immigrants, they really are.
But then
and I feel bad for them.
Then it becomes the question, to the extent that capitalism, as part of cultures, Micco was not a capitalist. He grew his pigs, his cows, and went fishing and had his farmland where, so that they could eat and be at peace. So capitalism wasn't a part of it. And going back to what you just said, Michelle, I think that we have to think through that there are people who have been cultured as capitalists. Black people in this country have not been cultured as money being the only thing. And that plays a lot with unwillingness to do anything, to give up our frosting of humanity, except for those people who have considered themselves exceptionalists and are willing to do that. So when you see people coming from especially poverty-stricken countries, they're not here for white folks' constitution and none of that stuff. They are here to break poverty. And
see you, Karen. Karen has to leave.
Okay, Karen.
Okay.
See you next week.
And I think in breaking poverty, they see who has the economic resources. And that's who they run with. They run with the horses. So your comment about immigrants, but the other thing too is how people are cultured into this society. And there are many immigrants who come in and go with white supremacy as the principal.
I guess I have a question. It, if you look at most countries, there is a level of colorism. Prior to even getting here, you already believe who's at the bottom of the barrel. So then when you decide to get to the new place, you bring that with you. So you already may have plans to step on and stand on and climb over and above people who are darker than you.
Yeah, that's a good point, Kim, because they've already been taught the people you're going to compete with are not the white people. The people you're going to compete with are the black people. So you got to move that competition out the way. And here are the weapons. Yeah, Micco had a lot to learn. Micco was way off my list by the time it was all over, you know. Um, and then when they named the baby Beauty, that was I was like, what the hell?
The lady, the lady,
Lady, yeah, lady. Uh,
lady.
um,
Yeah. Yeah. Her name, that's Eliza, but he calls her lady.
and you just have to take a breath. I was doing a lot of sighing.
Mhm.
I was doing a lot of sighing. So the
Yeah.
village became a farm, and the farm became a slave, a plantation, and then the plantation got kicked out. I just
Mhm. And the other thing to me that stood out, there was the piece about counting the moons versus collecting the days on paper. There were a couple of things like that were cultural differences or just really different ways of doing things. And one is not necessarily better than the other. They're just different. And so, you always have these clashes when one group or one person feels like their way is the only way that something can be done. And so to me, that's why there was such a clash of cultures, because white folks don't know how to live in peace with other people and let other people count the moon if that's what they want to do.
well, I think that's an element of domination. Um, you're posing those questions in the assumption that they cared, or they even counted counting the moon as
Right.
something, you know.
Right. And so it hasn't come out, I think, strongly in the book yet, but I see the building blocks of it. Even going back to one of the earlier chapters where, we call it Georgia, we call it, and so it's like, ultimately, it always has to be the white man's way. Well, this is what we call the law. Well, we got another perspective on law. Well, it's got to be our way. And so so I guess we're never going to have peace in the world as long as we have that attitude that there's only one way and it has to be my way.
I wanted to go back and check something that I didn't check before I went into these chapters. She always seems to quote W.E.B. Du Bois before the chapter.
The song.
And she doesn't do that.
I didn't do that this one. Yeah.
Yeah, she did it before Dream and Fracture. And to read that, I guess it relates. She did it before What Is Best, but she didn't do it on these others. So I guess it's the reference for these chapters, but her Du Bois quote comes from Dark Water, Voices from Within the Veil. If a man die, shall he live again? We do not know. But this we do know, that our children's children live forever and grow and develop toward perfection as they are trained. All human problems, then, center in the immortal child and his education to the problem of problems. And first, for illustration of what I would say, may I not take for example, out of many millions, the life of one dark child. And Karen highlighted that last week.
No, I did.
Oh, was it you that read that? Yeah. And it didn't strike me as so much until Micco's failure. Micco's disappearance. Because keep in mind, Joe never visited him again. Well, she says he would never in his lifetime. So,
yeah. And that I did the immortal child, and what Karen was saying about it last week was, to her, it says, that we have all of these generations hence to work out these problems, to get it right. And so I think, I think that to me is the connection in this song too, is that, as we're saying here tonight, we can all understand how Micco and Mahala couldn't see it coming, even though it's very clear to us this story is not going to end well.
Yeah, but we're Monday night quarterbacks.
Right. But as soon as Sam Pinchard pulled up to the farm, and came in for a visit, and they went to fixing him tea and asking him to stay, we all shaking our heads like, "Don't do it, Micco, don't do it." But because we're Monday night quarterbacks, but but we're still, even what I was saying a few minutes ago about this issue of domination, my way, or is the only way. We just keep having, as a species, we just keep having the same kinds of struggles over and over again, because we're not solving anything.
But then doesn't it become our responsibility and challenge to always be asking, who are our allies? Who is my comrade? And maybe because we're trying to carve out, in this story, and Micco is trying to carve out a species, he should have been carving out a tribe. His ass should have gone with the people in the first place. Okay, that's the first thing. So that's an ego thing. I'm not going to try to intellectualize what he was doing there. It was an ego thing. Very much like what his father did. rather than looking out for the interests of his family. He went,
but also very, very American or very European or very Western culture, to go off and chart your own path. Micco's own sons, they did decide to go back to the tribe, but they were choosing a path different than their parents. So I just think it's not unusual for young adults to want to try a different way. And if the world weren't so dangerous, it really would be okay to me, understandable to me that you want to do. You saw your parents' lives, just as I was talking about my parents earlier. Even without them saying specific things, I was still learning from their behavior and drawing my own conclusions about how I felt about it. And I didn't necessarily want to do everything the way they did it, but it's the unnatural dangers that are out there that I think make us want to hold on to our children as long as possible and, just have them take whole cloth what it is we tell them to do that comes out of our wisdom. But children, they have their own ideas.
Yeah, but his children were going with the Klan. Not going
with the Klan.
Not going against the Klan.
Right, but he was doing something different than Micco and Mahala, which I thought was interesting because where did they even get this desire to be with the Klan? If they had been raised in a nuclear family kind of situation.
Well, keep in mind that the Creek tribe was still intact when they were children. The tribe just moved somewhere else, and they went with the tribe. That's what I'm thinking. Anyhow, Micco is a lost cause, and he done caused a lot of shit. that can't get turned back. So.
And you will remember the part where Samuel Pinchard was saying, don't make me have to go get those boys from the tribe.
That was a threat.
Yeah.
If you don't do what I say, your family is under threat.
Yes.
That's why he should have killed him. I'm telling y'all, he should have killed him. I'd have burned that.
He'd have had an unfortunate accident on the farm, on the plantation.
While he was laying in bed.
Yes, he threatened his boys.
Also he paused before he killed his father. Remember? It was a weakness attempting to somehow negotiate. And Samuel Pritchard proved to him that you are an African and I can take you as a slave, put your family in slavery. There is no room for negotiation. There's only one thing that you can do. Stop me. And he didn't hear that. Kim, you hear me over here killing up people? And to the extent, I know that I tried to make a little excuse for him that he couldn't have imagined. There was nothing that gave him the pieces of the puzzle to imagine what was coming.
Yeah, but when you threaten my sons, when you tell me
Yes.
I will
Yes.
go get your sons
Yep.
and enslave them, then Micco should have, he didn't, what more do you need?
Yeah, yeah. But if you go back in the story, it was with Nyla that we discussed last week. The wise counsel available to her had warned her. Micco had been warned. But when you think you know more than it's like young people, they think they know, oh, that was white people a long time ago, they don't do that anymore. Or some more shit, crazy shit.
Right. Right.
So he had been warned. And I think he was soft. When he talks about how he felt about bushy hair, and he talks about how he felt about his father, and he talks about how he felt about his mother and his white daddy, blah blah blah. He talks from an immature emotion. So he found himself where he was, and he ignited for his family hundreds of years of misery. So Honorée, I hope in her interview, she's telling people right at the point that this decision was made, right at the point of the decisions that we're making about how we're going to handle the attack on critical race theory, the attack on voting, the attack on by the police is shooting our kids in the street, who goes to prison and who doesn't go to prison, etc., etc. We're at that point. We're at Micco's point, where hundreds of wise counsel people, Martin Luther King, you could go, Martin Luther King, Malcolm's wife, Malcolm's, Conrad Worrill, to Huey Newton, the list goes on and on. But we still think we know, because that was white people back then. Not white people, not the white people that work at my university, not my president of the chancellor or the dean of my college, not them people. They're talking about the people back there. And Samuel was no different from his father. Except he's smarter. That's all. So that's how I'm processing all of this stuff.
I have a question. Oh, BJ, I didn't want to cut you off.
No, I'm
but
through.
I'm glad you brought back up the quote from Within the Veil, because I don't know if you guys see this same pattern that I'm seeing from the part where he says all human problems then center in the immortal child, and his education is the problem of problems. So, and I'm looking at some of the main characters like Nyla, and then Ailey, and then even Nana and Micco, and that immortal child. And I'm trying to think about this in a different way as to why she would use this quote. Is that in each of these people, there is a child that needs to learn a lesson. They have a problem. And depending on how they attempt to solve or not solve that problem is the problem. Because inside them is a child. So Nyla, inside her is that immortal child who still thinks about all those wonderful things that they, that her village built her up to be, but she misused it because she's still a child. She's not mature, in the ways that BJ was talking about, how you can use, the knowledge and power of the people around you who are there for you, right? Your support system. And then, Ailey, she was remembering, when she was accosted by and Antoinette, that she wanted to use peaceful words, but she wasn't mature enough to deal with, okay, she gonna hit me. What am I gonna do? If you had more education and experience, you would know, okay, this chick might come with some hands. I need to defend myself. So her immortal child folded under, I don't know what to do next. So let's look at Nana, the immortal child. In her, the colorism, right? And the class and the status, not real recognizing what she's missing in the richness of her own family, because she's holding on to this childlike admiration of a bygone era of antiquated ideas. Then we move to Micco, his immortal child, missing the father figure. He imagined that guy to be who he wasn't really, but it led him into, because he couldn't solve the problem that his immortal child had with dealing with what he'd done. He'd taken an adult action, right? He made an adult decision, but couldn't process it. So it led him to trust someone he had no business trusting, and then continue on, that generational immortal children trying to solve problems.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. I don't know,
Yeah.
that's the link I'm starting to see between these characters, because I'm just wondering, why, what's the pertinence of some of the quotes, and
Yeah.
then her building up of the story in
Yeah.
relationship.
That makes sense to me. I think you're onto something. Now I am just realizing it's 9 o'clock, and last week, Kim, Leonie sent me a message in the chat at close to 9 o'clock, and she said, "What time y'all in?" I said 9 o'clock. She said, "Oh, you go 2 hours now. I thought you used to go 90 minutes." And I had completely forgotten. And now I have completely forgotten tonight. And here we are at 2 hours.
But we haven't finished the other part.
What other part?
The
No, I don't think we're going to what is best is next week.
What is right? Best is next week.
Yeah, but we didn't deal with Lydia's drug thing.
Is that in this part?
That's not in this part. You must have read ahead. We're doing the definition of Siddity, and where Lydia Lydia eloped, and was telling her family. Yeah.
And talking about the immortal child. To the extent that, just a few minutes on this thing of how she was lying and living a fake life and lying to her family.
Who?
Lydia.
Yeah.
Oh, uh-huh.
Because I wasn't sure if she was in school and flunked out, and she called and said she had gotten into Spelman or wherever, and she was going to Atlanta. Then she had a boyfriend that went to Morehouse, and whether or not he really went to Morehouse, I wasn't sure about any of those things. But what I was sure about is she was out and out lying.
Yeah.
And she had a mother and a father that didn't seem to require lies.
Mm-hmm.
That's that's what I couldn't figure out. What is she doing? And that perhaps this whole notion, and I always go back to secrets. Um, Perhaps what was happening here is that between her trauma and the conspiracy of lies in her family, she couldn't, she had to choose her own destruction. Was she choosing her own destruction? I don't,
Well,
I can't
if I
imagine a
think,
kid from her family
yeah, but if I
not
think
understanding
about,
the dangers of not confiding in them. She was gone so long, and then she was on the drugs and had to go to rehab. Blah blah blah. I
yeah, I don't think we got to the drugs rehab part,
okay.
but we did get to this elopement. And if I think about that, which happens in the same chapter with Siddity, and the sort of peer pressure that what's the child's name, Ailey, was dealing with in high school, where she wanted so much to be a part of the cool girls group, the mean girls group. And even though her father had high expectations of her, she was not at that point thinking for herself. She was going along with the flow. And so, I think there can be a similar kind of pressure when you go away to college, as Lydia did, where because I remember the music, the era that all of this is happening in. And even in my generation, there was still like a high expectation that your ultimate goal in life was going to be to get married and have babies. Or at least have babies. And so, I'm just saying that maybe it was related to her trauma, but given where it's placed in the chapter, it could be another example of what happens when you're not thinking for yourself and are, just kind of along with peer pressure.
Can I add to that, Michelle? I think it has to be babies that are lighter than you are.
No, but he was dark skinned, wasn't he?
I think he was dark skinned.
I'm just saying that when you don't have your own agenda and when you're going along with the flow and you are just want to just get married, that's your thing, then it might be to have children that are even lighter than you are at a certain point. And I think that's changing. So I'm not saying
because if you're not thinking for yourself,
I don't think that I disagree that has changed, Kim.
Yeah.
Look at all these black women having babies for all these Puerto Rican, other Hispanic, Latin American men, Mexicans, for the purpose that their children will have long, silky, curly hair.
Mm-hmm. Gio, I see your eyes about to pop out. What do you want to say?
They even make
Is
songs
that
about it.
is that mortal child who still needs that Barbie doll?
Yes. I mean, I saw a very popular talk show host,
Mhm.
serious talk show host. She's not a comedian or anything. And she posted a picture of a black doll. And it said, this was on Twitter just yesterday, and it said, my husband just bought this doll for our daughter. Do I go home? And it was a dark skinned doll that looked it's one of those dolls, they have those dolls now that look like they're actually alive.
Ooh.
They do have a doll. It's a, they're beautiful dolls, and you can get them in different skin tones. And this doll had, I don't know what you call the ponytails with the bushy hair.
Afro puffs.
Afro puff, yeah.
Yes.
And I said to myself, I think she's going to be regret that she posted this in this way.
I don't understand the posting. Could you just repeat what you said?
It
She.
said, it said, my husband just bought this doll for
Uh-huh.
our daughter.
Uh-huh.
Should I go home?
Like she
Here's the doll.
like she didn't want to take that doll to her child.
Did the husband give the
Like she
doll
was
to the
afraid
child?
of the doll was ugly, or the doll was frightening, or something. And those dolls are
Oh.
very frightening, because I bought one for my niece and my grandniece, and who loves dolls. And this doll, when you touch it, it kind of moves like that.
Oof.
Wow.
And the doll looks I bought it because this doll looks just like my niece did at 5 months old. And it's a beautiful doll. You just have to I mean, when you touch it, the shoulders kind of move like this, like she's snuggling in.
Wow.
Okay.
I don't want no part of that. I'm sorry. I may have to have that post too, but for a different reason. I think I would just kind of say,
But here was a doll, as opposed to the kind of black dolls that you've seen in the past that had perfect pecan colored skin. Had bangles on her on her wrist. I thought it was a beautiful doll.
With
The
an
only
afro
thing,
puff.
the
as long
only
as
thing
she's
that I
not
didn't
moving, I'm
like
good.
was um what do you call them, hairline things?
Oh, the baby hairs?
Baby
What?
hairs. And all you had to do was whisk those back. I mean, it was too much of them, and it was too long or whatever. I don't know. But people do that to their little girls' hair. They brush out the baby hairs, which is why they call them baby hairs. But anyway,
But
uh,
that's trending so much right now that everybody does that thing. That's
yeah,
just
yeah.
Wait a minute. They got fake baby hairs. I must tell you.
What?
I just happened to be driving by, do a drive by on a YouTuber, and she was like applying fake baby hairs. I'm like, what? Eyelashes are not enough. They need the
And,
fake baby
you know,
hairs too.
that's why I wish somebody appoint me as the chair of the council of cancel bullshit. Because I would be canceling a whole bunch of shit. Because it's so distracting to us. I don't care.
yeah.
I know y'all love Beyonce or whatever, but the
Yo
black
who?
people,
Yo who?
whoever.
Kim.
But I think all of that stuff, it gets blown out, and black people can't pay attention to nothing else. Just like, and I know we talked about it before, them
Mm.
eyelashes that look like bat wings. And I see congresswomen on the goddamn TV with
No.
I'm
Oh.
trying to think the name of the lady. Even Sheila Jackson Lee had some on. And I'm thinking, what the hell are you doing? But
Yeah, we just don't seem to have, even
it's
this
like
thing
we're not serious.
that happened this week with Joe Biden calling the Fox newscaster a stupid fuck or whatever he called him.
So
Did he say SOB? Yes.
Dumb son of a
SOB.
bitch.
Right. So, just to me, even the energy that it takes to be all up in that kind of a story is like, does anybody realize this country is on a steep slide to hell? Why would we care what Joe Biden called the news? Donald Trump could call anybody anything he wanted, and nobody had nothing to say about it. But
I agree about that. I really do agree about that, Michelle. Because and he said it. He thought the mic was closed, and he said, "What a dumb son of a bitch." And this guy is a dumb son of a bitch every day in that press room. But we kind of like get ourselves embroiled in stuff that contradicts us as our in regard to our posture.
Yeah. Right. There were so many hours in the day.
Yeah.
That's right.
And maybe that's why they was calling me Siddity in junior high school, because I was always talking about something, they need to put a top on the landing that you have to walk down into to go to the band room, because when it rains, you get wet.
Okay. That's important.
That was my thing in the 9th grade. Trying to get to school to I was in the principal's office every day. Mr. Sales, you don't understand. If our instruments get wet, they're ruined, blah, blah, blah. And by the time I was in the 10th grade, they had a roof over that little thing. But anyway. So I'm looking at Lydia. And she's really bent out. And I'm looking at her mother, who is really posturing. Posturing. As though she's got 2 daughters who are bent out and turned inside out. And she's not asking any challenging questions about their life. But I'm starting to suspect, and I haven't read long enough, that Daddy was having an affair.
All right, you're giving away too much now. We haven't read all this.
I haven't read that. I haven't read that. But it's sure in my brain. I'm wondering what keeps him happy. Certainly not her posturing. Certainly not her rage. Certainly not all the secrets underneath his roof. So what's keeping him happy? Because he's happy as shit. He's so happy. That's a happy man.
Well, maybe we'll find out it's the nurse. Where's the nurse?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. The other in this part of how they so easily ask Ailey to keep the secret. and how she so automatically understood that she could not mention, say anything ever to anybody that Lydia was missing.
Good night, guys. I'm gonna go.
Okay.
Okay,
Good night,
Kim.
All right,
Kim.
Kim.
So nice seeing you.
Yes.
See
So,
you
We'll
next
see you
week.
next week.
Bye, everybody.
good
Okay.
All right.
night,
Have a
Kim. Good
good
to
week.
see you.
I'm,
Okay,
I'm gonna